Hi everyone, Darren Hunter here, and we are with Dennis Youssef. We are Inspired Growth Training, and today we have a really special show for you. Don't forget also, this video recording is available on iTunes podcast and also Podbean for the Android users out there. Just dial up the PM Growth Expert Show. Listen in the car between appointments. But today we have the one and only Sophie Lyon. Now, Sophie has nearly 30 years experience in property management.
Sophie, started when she was 5.
That's quite an achievement. Quite an achievement. And Sophie is seen as a general in property management. She's one of those people that is very, very well known, particularly in Victorian property management. Today, we're going to talk about acquisitions and buying property management businesses. Now, I just want to get some terminology out of the way because we've got listeners from Australia, New Zealand, and the United States. When we use the word rent roll, that also means portfolio as well, or group of managements, or rental properties that we've purchased. So that's the terminology we're going to be using today. But before we get into asking Sophie a lot of questions we've got lined up, we want to talk about our sponsor. Our exclusive sponsor partners, which is Ebm Landlord Insurance. Now, look, we've said it before, you need to make sure your owners have quality landlord insurance on board, not just landlord insurance. And one of the great things about Ebm Landlord Insurance is their pet damage cover. Now, Sophie, you've got a very big rent roll or company that you're dealing with there. Now, Sophie, you told me before you dealt with a pet claim issue with Ebm, and they settled it for you. What happened there?
The tenants had a dog in the property that they weren't supposed to have. Used to allow the dog into the house quite regularly, and it decided that it would chew the bottom of all the cupboards in the kitchen. So they were completely ruined, and Ebm absolutely supported the owner and got the whole thing rectified. Absolutely no mess, no fuss, really easy.
So tenant didn't have the dog approved, so it was already against the lease and possibly the most expensive part of the house, the kitchen.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you see, we've got to be careful because pet damage is a very common exclusion on just about every other insurance cover out there. So you need to make sure you not only got landlord insurance, but quality protection that has the pet damage worked in, particularly in this day and age where I've learned over the years, people don't have dogs and cats anymore. They got fur babies and they come inside. So, well done. And thanks again to Ebm Landlord Insurance for wrapping that one up quickly. But let's get started and let's start this journey. Actually, firstly, Dennis, over to you.
Appreciate your time, Darren. So, Sophie,
my time. What about Sophie's time?
No, your time at the beginning. You're a great radio person. It's awesome. I'm glad you do all the sponsors stuff in the intros. But
nice you, Darren.
Look, it's an absolute pleasure having you, Sophie. So, I first met you at a conference, seeing you stand up and present, and you were actually one of the first offices I actually visited in the first year when I started consulting. So it's awesome to be able to have you on the show. That's like nearly 6 years ago, would you believe? It's quite crazy to think. It's actually possibly exactly 6 years ago.
Oh, really?
So,
there you go.
Yeah, it was about July. It was. There you go. July 2013 it was. My first
Happy anniversary.
Yeah, there you go. That's awesome. So it's awesome to have you on the show. We've had you present at Inspired Growth, the conference as well, and we've got you speaking this year as well, which I'm super excited about. So because you've got so much to give, which is awesome.
Thanks.
Now, why did you join real estate? Darren just said earlier that you started real estate when you were 5 years of age.
Yeah, 5. Yep.
Yeah. So, 30 years of experience. That's pretty awesome. Not too many people wake up at school and go, I'm going to become a real estate agent. You must have been one of them.
No,
you
absolutely not. I really didn't know what I wanted to do when I left school. So my parents very kindly sent me off to do a receptionist course. Came out of the receptionist course and was looking for a job. So back in those days, there was this thing called a newspaper, and you used to look in the newspaper for job ads, I found one in there that wasn't too far away from home that was a receptionist for a real estate company. I went for the job. It was offered to me on the spot. I just assumed that if someone offered you a job on the spot, you took it. And I actually didn't even realise that I had to work Saturdays. So I worked every Saturday from 9 till 12. And I still maintain that if they had actually told me that bit, I probably wouldn't have taken the job. And then the rest is history. So very small company in Caulfield in Victoria, which isn't there anymore, run by a wonderful man named A.B. Weiser. And here we go.
I think a lot of, people could resonate in, they don't want to tell anyone applying for a property management or a real estate position the truth behind it, or no one would apply. So, very smart of him to, and you need to be grateful that he didn't tell you about the Saturdays, because the achievements that you've been through is just absolutely phenomenal. So, you've worked with some of the largest, privately owned agencies in Australia, and Jellis Craig, where you are now. It's you're certainly kicking some serious goals there. So, if you were to go back to when you first started in real estate, now I understand it's that reception position, but maybe when you first got into that property management position, what advice would you give yourself going into work on that first day? Knowing what you know now.
Probably to enjoy the ride a little bit more. I probably took it all a bit too seriously in the beginning, and probably beat myself up a little bit too much about things that maybe didn't exactly go the way that I wanted them to go. But real estate has been so amazingly good to me, and it's been such a great, enjoyable career, that I would not say anything to discourage myself from pursuing it, most definitely. And actually, there's very, very little about my career over the years that I would change. So other than, just don't sweat the small stuff so much, that'd probably be it.
Yeah, well, they certainly, whatever the rough times are, certainly prepares us and molds us into who we are today. It hurts sometimes, as real estate does do, but, we tend to forget there's so many joys and goodness in real estate as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's how the three of us met, right? Was at a conference. That's, so, the connections that you get through real estate is just phenomenal. Sometimes we only look at the small, but you certainly do lead the way in the industry, and that's awesome. So tell us a little bit about, your position and your office now, what you're doing in your market.
Then in Jellis Craig, you mean, what I'm doing? Yeah. So I head up the property management division of the Burundara Group. So we've got 3 offices in Hawthorn, Glen Iris and Baldwin. Got just under 3,000 properties under management. I've got a team of about 34. And so, that's pretty much it, I guess. But my role is basically to oversee it. It's strategy. It's, where to from here, long-term vision stuff, developing people, developing the team. Just enjoying what I do, really.
Brilliant.
Cool. All right. Let's just move questioning now, Sophie, to rent roll acquisition or buying rent rolls. Now, you've told me that in your career, you've been involved with about 12 rent roll acquisitions, totaling around about 2,500 properties. And the largest rent roll or portfolio that you've been involved with the purchase was 850 at one time, which is quite a mean feat. So we're going to just break these questions down into 3 key areas. Number 1, buying a rent roll, what to look out for, some of the tips and tricks there. Also, we're then going to move to due diligence and the importance of that, and then get into settlement time. Now we've got the portfolio on board and just bedding it down on some of the key issues there. And one thing I want to say to everybody, I've been involved myself in 16 rent roll acquisitions. They can be an amazing learning curve for anyone with a career in property management. They can very much break you very quickly if it's done wrong, and can cause all sorts of problems and chaos. And each one has a different degree of difficulty and a new learning curve every time. I would say probably 1, maybe 2 out of the 16 that I dealt with were generally pretty easy. But the rest were quite difficult. So let's just go through your journey. And I think this podcast is going to be great for anyone that's considering taking on and buying a rent roll at the moment. Certainly in Australia, there's a lot of principals retiring, and there's a lot of acquisitions going on. So, okay, let's talk about, okay, you're ready to go. You want to get some growth, but you're going to go out and buy a rent roll. You're aware of a rent roll that's in a market area. You know, what are the sort of things that we need to be looking out for, Sophie? You know, you've mentioned here that, at the high-priced rent roll and the badly priced rent roll. Help us with that. What are some of the learning curves you've had?
There's benefits to both. I don't think that anyone should be scared of taking on a rent roll that has been poorly maintained, or that the property manager disappeared a few years before and the principal's been trying to keep it running and really hasn't been able to. They can actually deliver quite good benefits into your company, because if they haven't been communicated with, if they haven't been looked after, it's actually quite an easy step to bring those clients back around, because they've got such low expectations of the management that they have at the moment, that if you come in and start communicating with them and start delivering to what you think is a perfectly normal standard, for them that may be far and away above what they've experienced before, and so straight away you've bedded in that loyalty from that client, because they can see that you're better at what they have experienced previously.
So you really got to have a look at and see how well have these owners been looked after. And I absolutely agree that if your standards are here and your level of customer service is here, but that particular business has had the standards here and the owners are used to that, going from here to here is a good thing. But it's not good the other way around. That's also what I've seen. A lot of damage has occurred where the new purchaser has not been able to maintain the customer service levels and communication points, and the owners have been disappointed, and that's resulted in a lot of loss as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's where you've got to weigh one up against the other, and probably look at the synergies of the business and where you feel that you can actually deliver better or equivalent to the agent that you're taking over. If it's an extremely well-run business and therefore you're paying at the top price range, you want to make sure that your retention is going to be really good, because otherwise it's just wasted money. You're just losing it straight out the door.
Yes. Yeah. Well done.
And I suppose the reason why a person's selling as well, someone retiring or someone not coping, is two different things to look out for.
Yep, absolutely.
Retiring, it could be a great systems in place, et cetera. Or the property management has retired them, So there's certainly, you got to look at all things, don't you?
So let's talk about staffing issues as well. So at this stage, you may, the owner has said, hey, look, I've got some staff that I want to bring over with the purchase, or, share your experience there, Sophie, in assessing staff.
Well, it's not just whether they're good at what they do, it's whether they're going to fit into your culture as well. Especially coming from a small company, what I have seen in the past is people coming from small companies who are very used to doing things the way that they want to do them. So if they're a one or a two-man band, that they'll have their own processes, procedures, they'll do things the way that they want to do them. They come into an organisation like ours, which is a relatively big machine, and we start saying to them, oh no, you don't do that, that person over there does that. You don't do that, that gets processed automatically. And they struggle with that, because suddenly they're being moved into an environment where they feel like they've lost a bit of control. So that can be quite a delicate one to be able to transition people through. So that's definitely something to bear in mind when you're bringing people over, and have a really good open discussion with the staff beforehand about, this is the way that we work, this is how we do things, and make sure that they're comfortable with that transition. Because if they're not, then they're better off moving out before the properties come over, rather than coming over, be here for 3 months and then go, no, this isn't working for me. And all the way along, we've said to the clients, no, it's okay. Jane's going to be here. Jane's going to be here. Jane's going to be here. Jane's not here.
Another question too is reason for selling. At this stage, you've likely been told, or you're aware of their reason for selling. What are some reasons you really need to pay attention to and use caution with?
I think The retirement one is probably, as Dennis said, probably one of the easier ones, because that's an easy communication to have with the clients, that this is the reason this is happening. I think possibly one of the ones to watch out for would be, and at the moment this is something that's happening in Victoria, that a lot of agency principals are choosing to sell their rent rolls because the market has been going very badly down here for quite a decent period of time. So the logic is to get a cash injection into the company, and then you'll worry about building up the rent roll later. That's always a hesitation on my part, because if that's the reason, they're not actually going out of business, they're not stopping trading, they're just selling off the rent roll. So if there's some degree of relationship there, there's a possibility that that may loop back around and go back to that organisation.
Yeah, so you'll lose clients because they just drift back in some way back to the people that they're familiar with and who
absolutely.
own their business. Yeah.
Another one that I got caught out with in the past was the principal was selling. He was selling to a couple of the salespeople. So he sold off the rent roll. The salespeople still had the relationship with a lot of those clients because they put them onto the rent roll in the first place. Because the company then changed hands, we had no recourse against that company, because when you are buying a property and there's due diligence and contractual obligations around not poaching, that was a completely different company that had now been set up, different company name, et cetera, et cetera. So we actually had no protection around those properties then being poached.
You couldn't put any restraints in place against those people.
But the restraint didn't apply to them.
Yeah, that's an interesting pitfall there.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Moving on. So, okay, and now let's talk about how important is due diligence, Sophie, and you've got a lot of years of experience. You said you go and do your own.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's my preference to go in, because I know what to look for, and I know what to look for quite quickly. And I always prefer to go in and actually look at the physical files and go into the physical environment where those files are kept, rummage around in filing cabinets, in credenzas, whatever it might be, and actually go looking for that information rather than rely on companies who say, oh, look, I'll bring you 30 files and you can go through those files. Well, they'll bring you 30 files that they know are well put together. They know the documentation's all in there. I prefer to go and, have a bit of a look through and pull out the fattest file and also the skinniest file, and then go looking in their system as well. So, into their drives and finding all the authorities that they've got, which ones are missing. There's a lot that you find if you are the person who requests to be in control of that due diligence.
So how long would you spend typically on a due diligence and time?
It depends on the size of the portfolio, but I've been in people's offices at like 7 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, going in 6 o'clock at night after the team have gone, because they obviously don't want to communicate that to the team yet. I've been on Sundays, all kinds of things. So it's sometimes you've got to jam it into a 2-hour window, and therefore you might have to go back a couple of times. Sometimes I've been there for half a day.
Yeah, I remember being called in for a due diligence, and I had to disguise it as a business health check. And so I came in as the consultant doing a business health check, and we got around that one pretty well.
When you said disguise, I thought you were going to say you had to disguise yourself, and I thought, oh my God.
No, I was there to do a business health check, and quite frankly, you can easily disguise the due diligence as a business health check.
Okay.
You ask the right question. So, okay.
It's more fun to picture you in a moustache and like a wig or something. But
yeah.
Anyway.
Now, when I did due diligence, it would take me around about 6 to check 6 files per hour if they weren't in good condition, really messy ones that people just throw stuff in. And this is back in the day of everything was paper. But it would take me around about 10 files an hour if they were generally pretty clean. Yep. And so I would do a sample of, let's say it was 100, 200 property rent roll. I would probably look at 10, at most 20 files and let the client know that I'm doing a sample and so forth. But, how far would you go with your file audit? How far would you go? Because I know you can read a lot in those files. Those files tell you a lot about the staff, the quality of staff, what's gone on, levels of accuracy, attitudes of the team, all of those sort of things. But how far would you go with your file audits?
You always want to look at the authorities. You want to make sure that the owner's instruction forms are there. You want to have a look at the physical copy of the condition report, if there is one in the file. If not, then you need to go and look for it, the electronic one. So routine inspections is another one, whether the lease agreement is in there, whether it's current, when the last rent increases were done. A rent increase is actually a good one. If you can find a business that hasn't done rent increases, that's actually good, because straight away you can increase the rents and it gives your business
value to the business value as well. Well done.
Yeah. So that would be the big rocks that you want to look for, but very much around the documentation and making sure the documentation is current. The other thing in Victoria, it may not apply to, well, it's definitely not going to apply to the United States, but making sure that the authorities that are signed actually have the novation clause, because that dropped off the Victorian authorities for a few years. So you can actually novate authorities over in Victoria rather than having to go back and redo the authority completely.
So as in you can assign the authorities to the new company, as opposed to getting all the owners to sign a whole new management authority right on settlement. I know different states, different rules. So good to know that. Okay. All right. Now, okay, let's say we got 200 properties you're bringing over. How many of those files would you check?
30 to 50.
Yeah, a good sample. Yeah, and a cross section, big ones, fat ones, thin ones, just a random section across. Okay, that's cool. All righty, and all right. So, what are some big questions that you do want to eyeball people with and sit down? And what are those serious questions that you've got for the business owner or the key person that you want to know at the due diligence? What's really important?
You really want to talk to them about the quality of the owners, and just finding out whether there are any owners in there that you really don't want. You're paying for an owner, you're stuck with them for a number of years. Tenants come and go. I'm not going to say the word that I said before. You guys can say it. I just can't bring myself to say it on a podcast.
Sophie said you got to look out for the assholes. and let's be serious. Difficult owners are difficult all round. And you know, but what about also multi-property owners as well? You know, the owner with the 30, the 40, the 50 properties, all of those sort of things, and asking questions around that, Sophie.
Yeah, well, you definitely want to know who the bigger owners are, and they're the people that you need to get in front of. In all honesty, even if they're overseas, I would be trying really hard to physically get in front of those people, or at least do this kind of interaction with them, because they're the sort of people that it's a business for them. So it's in most of the environments, it's a business, but they may also have very tight relationships with the existing staff. And so that transition can be very difficult. So they're definitely the ones that you want to get in front of and build up the love with very, very quickly. Also, I think with the ownership side of things, you want to find out whether there's properties that are owned by family or friends or staff in there, because if the staff own the properties and then you're paying for those to come over and then the staff leave, you've immediately lost that money. So you really want to make sure that you ask those questions. If there are properties that are poorly maintained, you want to know about that, because you want to make the decision as to whether you do actually want to take those properties over or not. And you do have the discretion to pick and choose. A lot of people will say, no, you take the whole lot or you don't take it at all. If there's 3 properties in there that you don't want to take and the whole deal is going to fall over because of it, generally you'll be able to work around that in some way, shape or form. Also, if there's VCAT stuff coming up.
So pending hearings and complaints. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about difficult situations that could be, you know, just bubbling away. You know, how do you ask those sort of questions?
Just ask it straight out. I think, you know, as you said before, sitting down and eyeballing people, I think there's a lot of face-to-face meetings. You can tell I'm a very face-to-face person, but that's what you need to do in these sort of scenarios, because it's difficult for people to be false with you if they're sitting right in front of you, as opposed to just asking them questions on a check sheet and they go, oh yeah, no, oh yeah, I forgot about that one. You need to know.
So I eyeball them and say, I want to know about outstanding issues. I want to know about outstanding complaints, possible outstanding or possible litigation that we're going to have to deal with. What about negligence or payouts that have to be done? All of those sort of things that are the loose ends that are still not tied, that are going to come over on settlement.
Okay, so if you were to go to, if there was a hearing that was coming up in, let's say, 2 or 3 weeks or something, and does that property then come off the purchase? What happens? What's the
No,
process?
no, no. It's purely just so you know what's happening. So, I mean, there's always going to be VCAT hearings going on within any portfolio at any given time. I mean, that's just, that's logical. But it's the sort of stuff, though, is it the tenant taking the landlord, and in turn, is that landlord going to try and push that back onto the agent in some way? We've seen that happen over the years, that the agent's the one that actually perhaps they dropped the ball for whatever reason, and so the only way that the tenant has recourse is to make the claim against the owner, and then the owner's going to bring it back around. Sure. So those things you need to make sure that you are aware of, and that there's some allowance provided for, either in the contract or making sure that the professional liability insurance is maintained by the outgoing principal. So if anything does come up over the following years, that you have recourse to be able to go back and claim that.
Yep.
The fees and what are you looking for when you're checking out the fees that they charge?
A fee is good. As opposed to like
fees you're looking for as well. I know of agencies where there's no advertising charges, there's no marketing charges to their owners. So I know as a fee maximizer, and that's my forte, I have to wait a whole 12 months and carry all of those fees. And just be aware, you have to wear them and finance and carry that through to a point where you've got the trust, and then you can be asking owners for more.
Yep, then you can start pushing it forward. In Victoria, again, at the moment, I'm sorry, I'm going to be a little bit Victoria parochial, but there's a tendency at the moment, there's a couple of agencies down here who are going in with 3, 6 or 12 months commission free in order to get the business on. So, that's something that you need to be aware of as well, making sure that there isn't a whole lot of properties that are sitting in there that you're actually not going to get any income for.
Yeah, that's interesting. Look, I was part when I was at Integrity Real Estate. They purchased 12 managements from a company. Apparently, our company had a good BDM that was taking a lot of business for them, and they only had 12 left, so they decided to sell them.
Right.
I don't know who that was, but anyway, I was at a property and I was pitching for the business, and the owner rang me up the next day and said, "Look, I'm signing with the said company." And because they told me you guys are buying it anyway. Now, I wasn't aware as the BDM of this particular purchase that was going on, and the other company had lowballed the fees, right, just to win the business, to get that sale over the line. So I went to my boss and said, A, why didn't you tell me about this? And B, this is what's happened. So my boss CC'd me in an email to the other company that they were purchasing from, and said, you actually told the owner that we would be managing it anyway and lowered the fees, just so you know, if you do sign it, we won't be buying it. So, I mean, they're things that you need to be aware of as well.
Yeah. Dirty tricks. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Sophie, let's talk about due diligence again and staff. Now, you might be bringing some staff over. What are some things you're looking out for?
Touching on that like we did before, making sure that they're a good culture fit, and that they will adjust to the different environment that you're in. I have been part of part of a sale before where the staff were actually incentivised to stay on for the retention period by the seller of the rent roll, and they got a benefit at the end because they actually managed to keep the retention extremely high, which was good. It was a great thing. But at the end of that 3 or 4 month period, they both exited the business, and that was always their intention to exit our business. But we weren't made aware of that. So if you are going to incentivise people to stay on, I think it's better to be open and honest about that with the client. Because otherwise I'm sending one message as the new owner of the rent roll, saying, well, yes, absolutely, Jane's going to be here, it's all great, she's fitting in really well, and then all of a sudden Jane's disappeared, and the client straight away think then somehow you've been dishonest because you knew that all the way through, or there's a particular reason why Jane's gone. Why is Jane gone? I'm going to follow Jane. Jane's gone down around the corner, and there's nothing that we can do to prevent a client going with another property manager after we've settled. So that's not a good outcome for anybody. So to my mind, I would actually prefer to know if the property managers aren't intending to stay on beyond that. And then the story can be very different that you're telling the clients.
Yeah. So and you also said about family, but what about friends or best friends that own some of the rental properties as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
you know,
it's that whole relationship piece. You know, who are you related to? Who are you friends with? Why are these clients here? I mean, I've got clients that I've been dealing with for a number of years who've come with me when I've moved from company to company. So that's a question that I ask because that's my own personal situation. So is that sitting in that rent roll as well? That a property manager's come from, that agency to the one that you're buying, but they've had clients follow them because, of course, they're going to follow them.
Same thing's going to happen. Shouldn't it be one of the questions that any principal asks a new staff member? How many properties would be coming over? And if they say 5, 6, 10, 20, you don't employ them because if they leave, they're going to take them.
That just shows a level of loyalty right there, and you're going to be losing all those properties when they move on. So they're not really proper managements as such.
Yeah.
No.
A couple of due diligence that come to mind for me. Number one, I was called in to do a rent roll, and the owner or the person looking at purchasing wasn't aware it was actually a fully furnished rent roll. And so very quickly came out and said, you've got a completely different dynamic here. It's all furnished. You're dealing with students and all of the issues that come with a fully furnished. And within 5 minutes of delivering my report, they made that decision that they weren't going to take that on. And another rent roll due diligence that I did, we found out 25% of the properties currently had a for sale sign out the front with that particular business. So I know it was, so they're the sort of things that due diligence is very important to do, to find those things out that become a massive problem later on. But, I'm surprised, Sophie, the amount of people out there that don't do a due diligence.
No.
And they just won't. And so it's winging it. It's like getting a 20-year-old car and not getting it checked out. All sorts of problems can happen. So, people out there, go and get yourself a due diligence. Put that investment and time into getting a professional that knows what they're looking for. But anyway, let's move on. So you've done your due diligence. You've decided, Sophie, we're gonna buy that rent roll. You've done a deal with the principal. You've signed the contract there. Now we're moving over. And, what are some of the things now we've agreed, we've done the contract, settlement date hasn't come yet. What are some of the things now that we need to be considering in that time gap that we've got to get right now?
The probably the most critical one is the communication with the clients and how that is done. So the way that I have done it, forever, is that the first correspondence actually goes from the seller of the rent roll, explaining that this is what's happening, this is who we're merging with, it'll all be fine, it'll be great, here are some of the benefits, here are some of the things.
Lots of confidence. I remember we had a letter from us, letter from them in the same envelope, went out at the same time.
I would normally follow it up not long after with a letter from myself, introducing myself, referring back to the letter from the vendor, and just starting that communication, offering myself as a someone that they can call, they can email, they can talk to, because I've studied up. Obviously, I'm doing spreadsheets all over the place for that sort of thing. So, if someone gets on the phone, I straight away know their name, the address of the property that they look after, and they've got spreadsheets there so you can sort of jump in and have a bit of a look at what's going on. So that's probably one of the most important parts of it. Secondary to that would be the integration of all the information that's sitting in the system of the vendor or the seller at the moment, and how that's going to get into your system. So are you going to be able to integrate that? So is it going to be a data transfer? Or if your system isn't able to do that, does it mean that someone's actually got to sit there and enter all of that data manually? Which I have had to have my staff. I was going to say I've done it. I haven't done it. My team's done it in the past.
You've outsourced that?
Absolutely outsourced it.
Or some of the data comes across, but there's still other stuff that has to be manually
absolutely
as well. It can be quite messy, can't it? Very stressful.
Yep, you got to sit down and make sure that all the critical points of data are in there, and then on the day of settlement, just jump in and update all the paid to dates so they're correct. And when the seller is finishing, so that the day of settlement and everything is coming over, making sure that they're doing end of financial year statements, because that way the clients will end up with 2 end of financial year statements in any year that there's a transition of ownership. But you've got it there, you've got it ready to go.
Yeah.
Scan all those into your system as well. So if anyone comes looking for them, you've got them and you can access them readily.
Yeah. And I think working with the patterns, Sophie, you and I had a discussion, but we're used to getting in contact and having access to those new owners before settlement. But I know there's other deals out there that they won't allow the purchaser, the company that's taking over, to go anywhere near, talk to those owners until settlement. But at settlement, or immediately after settlement, or in your case before settlement, how many owners should we have already spoken to, or should be speaking to as soon as we can by phone? How quickly, other than letter and communication, that's an absolute given, that's essential. But how many people should we be speaking to and connecting by phone?
Oh, as many as you can get a hold of. It's all about to my mind, it's always been that I want the client to feel like they're involved in the process and they actually have a choice in it. I don't want them to feel like it's something that's been done to them or is happening to them. They feel like they've been complicit in all of this rather than it being pushed on them. So that communication piece is vitally important, because you need them to know who you are. You need them to know that you're a real live human being. You're not just a nameless, faceless piece of paper, that you do care, that you are invested, what your role is in the company, how long you've been there, what your experience level is. Now, if you need to push that out amongst the team, that's fine as well. But the person, there should always be like a central point of contact who is very aware of everything that's going on. So if the clients are getting a little bit frustrated, they can be pushed onto that person, which normally is myself, and I can have that conversation with them and really drill into what their concerns are, and try and alleviate those straight away. If they're not gelling with the property manager that we've given them to, fantastic. Tell me that and I can move you to somebody else.
Yeah. Well, you've really got to treat this like new business, as if you're chasing a brand new lead coming in the door. In transitioning, they've got to get that trust with you as well. And, I'm all for picking up the phone rather than sending an email out. So it's always the best way. But there you go.
Let's talk about issues. Now, how quickly do we need to be getting hold of the issues that we need to know now? And I always saw it as bushfires. You're going to get big bushfires, little bushfires. How quick, what sort of issues are you really want to be all over like white on rice right now?
If there's extremely high arrears issues or anything like that, if there's forthcoming VCAT hearings because the owner wants possession, you need to be across those to make sure that the timing is done properly, or you're across it if there's a drama. Anything that really is of importance to the client is probably the thing that you need to grab hold of. So if the other agency is telling you that there's this particular client and they always want to make sure that they get all their rents in on the 15th of the month, you need to go back and make sure that you've got all that set up. So there is a lot of communication that needs to go on between the people that you're purchasing the rent roll from, drilling down into tiny little things like that, because it's tiny little things like that that Mrs. Smith always wants her statement on the 15th and she won't come and pick it up. We've got to deliver it to her. Okay, if you've got to deliver it to her, you've got to deliver it to her. But if it means that we're going to hold on to Mrs. Smith for the next 12 months, 2 years, 10 years, whatever it is, because it will be tiny things like that will annoy people, and they'll go, well, you don't know me at all. You can tell me that you're great at all of this technology stuff, but you don't know me and what I need, and so I'm going to go somewhere else where they do.
Yeah. Yep, that's cool. And how do you deal with those owners that say, hey, we weren't given choice here, or getting to know who those grumbling owners are? Help me through that one.
They tend to come out of the woodwork pretty easily, to be honest. The ones who will grumble, the ones that you probably need to worry about more are the ones who don't. And they just kind of sit in the background, which is why that communication within the 6 months first 6 months needs to actually be pretty strong, that you are going to have the opportunity to pick up on those things, and really alerting the property managers to it as well. So as soon as, if they're having a conversation with Mrs. Smith and she even sighs, or you can hear her rolling her eyes on the phone, it's kind of like, you need to tell me that. I need to know, because then I need to get on the phone to her and find out what's going on.
Okay. As a landlord myself, if the company had sold to another company, I'd be on the phone straight away. I'd be one of those bushfires I'd be creating.
Yeah, you would.
Yeah, absolutely. But because to me, I never signed with the company because of the relationship I have with the property manager. I signed with the company because of the systems and procedures. Because I helped put them together. So, and I'm sure that's going to come. It's not just about relationship with the PM. It's about, well, what systems have you got? I signed with them because of, you came to my house and I chose ABC over Jellis Craig. So why should I come to you?
Yeah, exactly. It's that you can't get away from the fact that property management and real estate overall is a relationship business. So you can say as much as you like that we've got all this fabulous technology, we've got all these things that we can do for you. We do our inspections on iPads and we can email them and all that sort of thing. At the end of the day, I don't think it really matters to a client whether they've got an email version of a routine inspection report or whether they've got a handwritten piece of paper that might even be done on, that might have carbon paper attached to it.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
As long as the information is there and they feel like the person who is giving them that information is actually really truly invested and really cares, that will win over technology, in my belief, any day of the week.
Yeah. Okay.
So Sophie, let's continue on with this. Now, we talked about staff when we're looking for a rent roll and things we've got to consider. We talked about the due diligence. Now we've got the staff. What are some of the issues that we really need to be looking out for and making sure that those people are fitting?
Again, it's just about talking to them. It's about making sure that they're inducted properly, that they understand what the beliefs and the values of your company, the company they've come into are. I think that people pay a lot of lip service to that, and sometimes it's a bit of rhetoric, but I actually believe in it, and I think that it's important that people get where you're going as a company, the level of expectation you have around customer service, that you get that each client actually they're a human being as well as a dollar sign. There's so much that needs to sit behind it for people to actually make the decision as to whether they want to come into the company or not. I've heard plenty of times, our office, it is a beautiful office. I don't want you to come here because you think the office is beautiful. I want you to come here because you actually, you have found that your values are aligned with what we're trying to achieve as a company. So I think that's having those conversations with people early on when they're joining the company, I think is incredibly important. Because again, they haven't had the choice. It's happened to them. They've been told that your job isn't with John Smith Real Estate anymore. It's now with Jellis Craig. Off you go. Like, well, hang on a minute. What does this mean?
You're in your 3-month retention, for example. You've taken over the staff. They've come as part of the acquisition. But you can see that these people are not fitting. In fact, they don't really meet the level that you need them to be at. What are we doing now? What sort of action are you taking?
Well, I think if they're not fitting and they're not the right people, I don't think that there's any difference between, someone that you've employed through SEEK or someone that you've employed through an acquisition. You've got to make that call. That's the responsibility of the business owner, to make sure that the people that are there actually fit in properly with the business. You're not doing the right thing by anybody, I think, if you try and hold on to things for too long. Maybe it'll change, maybe it'll change, maybe it'll change. And then you end up 12 months down the track and nothing's changed.
Yeah.
So if the person who's come across has got a poor attitude, or their levels of customer service don't live up to what yours are, they're just generally disinterested, or they're just not nice people, I just don't think that they're the right fit, and you want to move them on.
Okay, let's put one on the table. Staff poaching properties.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and what are some key points around that? How you deal with that?
Well, again, in Victoria, if they're not a director of the company, there's very little that you actually can do. Unless you can prove that they've actually taken documents from the company that have given them names, addresses, phone numbers, etc. I think you've just got to really work hard to hold on to the clients and make it uncomfortable for the client to leave. More so than the property manager being able to ring them up saying, hey, it's all great and glorious over here, or I've gone here and you should follow me. There's going to be a certain percentage of clients who will do that, but overall, I think if the service continues and there is very little rough water between the changeover, I think you can hold on to the clients pretty successfully.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I reckon, Sophie, that was a really good session. Thank you so much. And Dennis, any more questions before we wrap this up?
No, I don't. It just continues to shine that, Sophie's got a wealth of knowledge, as anyone watching can see. She wasn't reading any notes, just certainly speaking from experience.
When you take on rent roll acquisitions, certain things get burnt into your heart, mind, and soul.
Yeah. I mean, what really stood out to me is it's like new business. It's all about onboarding that client.
Absolutely.
It's lots
of communication.
Yeah, you want to win more business. You've got to sell the services of your department, and you still got to win them over to transition and sign with you. It's all the same. Just doing it multiples at a time.
Yeah.
You've also still got to go and do the rent reviews, visit the properties, ascertain if you want the tenants. There's obviously a lot that you've got to do. Just like if you're taking over one management with a tenant already in place. So
So let's wrap this up, guys. But thank you so much, Sophie, for your wonderful depth and knowledge of expertise. I've been, admired you as an expert for many, many years, and just want to say thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, guys. Nice talking to you.
Thanks, Sophie.
All right, take care.